what we've got here is actually not the stone and rock colour. What we've actually got is the colour of the actual bed, the sand or the mud at the bottom of the river. And we're going to add some very slightly darker colour here, a few little bits and pieces to represent some of these stones and rocks and pebbles that's under the water. I want to make sure that I vary the colour, the shape and the size of these rocks and pebbles, and I'm just literally dabbing them in here, there and everywhere. They look quite dark at the moment, but I'm conscious that that is going to dry back a lot lighter, and I'm going to carry on doing that. And as I get in towards the blue area, I'm going to lighten these colours off so they're not quite so prominent as we get further up the river. Now you can see I'm just touching in some little streaks of a very watery brown colour in that blue area, just to represent some of the rocks as they get less and less distinct as they get further away from us. And I'm also just going to lift out one or two very gentle light areas, not too flooded, not too light. I don't want to take too much pigment out. Okay, that's fine. Now what I'm going to do to just emphasize the shape of these rocks is, if you have a look at the photograph, you can see each of the rocks, particularly the more prominent ones, has got a dark line, because even underwater these rocks are catching the light on the top surface, but the shadow side is casting that dark line, in this case on the right hand side. You can see the mix that I'm using. It's not an overly strong mix of burnt umber, but because it's being put on with the rigger brush, it looks all the stronger for it. And just putting a little hint of dark shadow. This is where these rocks are actually sitting out of the water. When we put the final washes on in a moment or two, that's going to tone in these rocks beautifully and give a very subtle impression of these rocks and stones sitting in shallow water just beneath the surface, but still catching a lot of the sunlight. Now the colours I'm going to use for the washes on the river are pretty much what I used earlier, and that's burnt umber with perhaps rather more light red mixed in this time, and that's going to give a warmer tone at the front of the picture. Going to be added to with a little bit of raw sienna as and when we need it, and we've got the ultramarine blue to take us out into the distance. Very gently, in as few strokes as possible, I'm barely letting that brush touch the paper. In fact, the brush is almost gliding across on a layer of water. No matter how careful you are, there is a little subtle blurring of these colours down here. Now we're going to go in with some of the ultramarine blue near the top, like that. Very, very light. That'll dry back almost to nothing because it's going to get diluted anyway with the water that's already on the paper. But it just helps to add a nice glaze. And then, as before, I'm just going to gently add this colour in, and just for the moment it's starting to blend some of these colours. Right, we've put that extra layer on, and it's just going to tie it together. It's just blurred down some of these rocks, only very, very subtly, but you've seen how gentle I've put that layer of water, that layer of colour on. Right, now I'm just using a mix of very pale raw sienna, the tiniest touch of ultramarine blue, really just to get the stark whiteness off the paper. We're starting to get a little bit of shadow, always on the right hand side, because remember the sun is coming from left to right. Right, and one final little technique just to put some little bits of sparkle on the water is using a razor blade. Now, for obvious reasons, you've got to be very careful when you use these that you don't cut yourself. If for no other reason, then bright red blood doesn't go well with the colours we've already used in the picture. If you use this on slightly damp paper, it's going to rip it much more so than you want. You're trying to create just a few little flecks where you're just taking off the surface of the water and a little tiny streak. It's so easy, like a lot of these techniques, to suddenly discover it and then go mad with it, and before you know it, your paper looks like it's been sliced up by Edward Scissorhands. I want to finish off by putting some reflections, some wavy reflections of these rocks in the water here that tells us in no uncertain terms that these rocks are sitting in shallow water. We've got the shadow on the right hand side of the rocks. What we need is the reflection that goes immediately below. I've lifted out that patch and I've done the same with one or two other rocks here that are just little streaks here and there just to represent the light areas that are catching the sun. Once it's all dried, you can see I've just gone back in one or two more tiny little nicks just to give that added sparkle just around the base of the rocks to give the idea of bubbling water. But you can see it's not difficult, it's only one or two steps beyond drawing basic puddles. And although this is a little bit laborious, once you know how to create those liquid washes to pull everything together, then it's almost second nature to be able to paint rocks underwater, just like that.